The hospital thought the night was over. The lights dimmed in the ER hallway. Cleaning crews rolled their carts. A woman in scrubs walked out the staff exit with nothing but a canvas bag and a quiet, steady breath. No applause. No goodbye party. Just the soft click of a time clock marking the end of a career no one bothered to thank. Then the glass doors began to tremble. At first, people thought it was thunder. Then came the sound, deep, violent, unmistakable, the roar of rotors slicing the air above the roof. Phones froze mid-scroll. Conversations died mid-sentence. Security looked up as shadows swept across the walls. Men in uniform moved fast, purposeful, silent. Someone whispered, "Is this a drill?" The answer came without emotion. "We're not here for the hospital director. We're not here for a patient. We're here for her." A pause. Then the words that would change everything. She answers to, "Ma'am." Before the doors even finished opening, the truth had already arrived. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. And if stories about hidden courage, quiet strength, and justice finding its moment speak to you, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss what comes next. Emily Carter stood at the edge of the employee parking lot, with her badge still warm in her palm. The plastic card was scuffed from years of use, the photo slightly faded, taken back when she'd still bothered with makeup before 12-hour shifts. She turned it once, twice, then slid it into the side pocket of her canvas bag. Not ceremonially, not angrily, just finished. Inside the hospital, no one noticed. The trauma bay doors were closed. The ER board was half cleared. A night nurse laughed softly at something on her phone. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped its steady, indifferent rhythm. Life went on with cruel efficiency. Emily paused by her car but didn't unlock it yet. For 17 years, she had measured time in shifts. Nights, weekends, holidays missed. She had learned to read people by the way they breathed under pressure, to hear lies in the pauses between words. She had learned how silence could save lives, or cost them. Tonight, silence had cost her a job. The meeting replayed in her mind with clinical clarity. No raised voices, no accusations sharp enough to bleed. Just a conference room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. The hospital director, Mark Reynolds, hadn't even looked uncomfortable. His hands had been folded neatly on the table, legal counsel seated at his right, like a shadow with a pen. Insubordination, Reynolds had said calmly. Failure to follow established chain of command protocols. Emily had listened without interrupting. "You accessed restricted files," the lawyer added. "You acted outside your scope." Emily had nodded once. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. When they finished, she'd asked only one question. "Is the patient alive?" The silence that followed had been just a little too long. No one answered. That had been enough. She leaned against the hood of her car, now the cold metal pressing through the thin fabric of her scrubs. The night air smelled like rain and jet fuel from the helipad above. Somewhere overhead, lights flickered as a maintenance crew ran final checks. Normal. Routine. Her phone buzzed. Emily looked at the screen. No caller ID. She didn't answer. Not yet. She slid into the driver's seat instead and closed the door gently, as if loudness might summon something she wasn't ready to face. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, steady, despite everything. People had often commented on that, how calm she stayed when others panicked. They assumed it was temperament. They were wrong. Her gaze drifted back to the hospital entrance, where two security guards stood chatting. They hadn't met her eyes when she walked out. They never did when someone was terminated. It was easier that way. Emily didn't blame them. She blamed the system that trained good people to look away. The phone buzzed again. This time she answered. "Yes," she said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, verification. "It's done," the voice said. Male, controlled, familiar in a way she hadn't felt in years. "You're clear." Emily closed her eyes for half a second. "Status?" she asked. "Stable. Transport window secured." A beat. "They let you go." "Yes." Another pause. This one longer. "I'm sorry," the voice said, not as sympathy but as respect. Emily exhaled slowly. It was always going to end this way. She ended the call before anything else could be said. Inside the hospital, the aftershocks were already forming. Mark Reynolds stood in his office overlooking the ER floor, reviewing paperwork that would protect the hospital from liability. He told himself this was necessary, that nurses like Emily Carter were dangerous not because they were incompetent, but because they didn't understand boundaries. Hospitals ran on order, not heroes. He'd built his career on that belief. Downstairs, Dr. Alan Whitmore finished charting and rubbed his temples. He told himself he hadn't had a choice. Federal escorts didn't ask permission. They informed. And when they informed you that a patient was classified, you listened. Emily Carter had not listened. That was the problem. Yet, even as he tried to reassure himself, an image surfaced uninvited Emily at the bedside that night. Her hands precise, her voice low and unwavering as the patient coded. The way she'd spotted the internal bleeding before the scans came back. The way she'd looked at the men in suits, not afraid, just assessing, like she was counting exits. Whitmore shook his head and returned to his screen. Outside, Emily finally started the car. The engine turned over once, then settled into a low hum. She adjusted the mirror, checking her face out of habit. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes now. Scars, too, if you knew where to look. Evidence of a life lived under pressure long before this hospital ever hired her. She pulled out of the parking space and drove toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped, not because of doubt, because of instinct. Emily shifted into park and cut the engine. She sat still, listening. At first, there was only the distant city noise, sirens miles away, traffic humming like a living thing. Then something else threaded through it. A low vibration, felt more than heard. Her jaw tightened slightly. Above the hospital on the helipad, a light blinked on. Then another. Inside the building, a security guard frowned and tilted his head. You hear that Reynolds' office window rattled faintly. He stood up, irritation prickling. What is that? The sound grew heavier. Deeper. No longer ambiguous. Rotor blades. Emily opened her door and stepped back out into the night. She didn't look surprised. She looked resolved. As wind began to whip across the lot, lifting loose trash and flattening the small trees that lined the drive, heads turned toward the roof. Phones came out. Conversations stopped. The first helicopter crested the building black against the sky. Then a second. Emily slung her bag over her shoulder and took one step toward the entrance. Whatever came next, she would meet it standing. 3 weeks earlier, the ambulance had arrived without sirens. That alone had caught Emily Carter's attention. It rolled into the bay just after 2:00 a.m. Headlights dimmed its engine, cutting off too cleanly like it had been rehearsed. 2 EMTs jumped out, followed not by family but by 4 men in dark jackets with no visible insignia. They didn't rush. They scanned. Emily had been charge nurse that night. She noticed everything. Male, mid-40s, one EMT said quickly, voice tight, unresponsive at scene. Found roadside. BP unstable. Emily moved to the gurney, her hands already gloved. The patient's face was swollen, one eye nearly shut. Bruising wrapped his ribs in deep purples and yellows, old and new injuries layered together. She'd seen abuse before. This wasn't a single incident. As they wheeled him in, one of the men in the dark jackets stepped closer. "We'll take it from here," he said, flashing a badge too fast to read. Emily didn't stop moving. "You can wait outside," she replied evenly. "We need space." The man frowned. "This patient is under federal medical emergency," Emily cut in her tone, calm but immovable. "And until he's stabilized, he's under my care." The man hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Emily saw it. They always told her she imagined things, that she read too much into posture, into pauses. But she knew that hesitation. It meant he wasn't used to being challenged by someone in scrubs. He stepped back. Inside Trauma 2, the doors closed and the noise swelled. Monitors beeped erratically. A resident called out vitals. Blood soaked the sheets as they cut away the patient's clothes. Emily leaned close, speaking softly into his ear as she worked. "You're safe right now," she said, not knowing if he could hear her. "Stay with us." As they rolled him, she saw it. Just below his left shoulder blade, partially hidden by bruising and old scar tissue, was a tattoo. Faded, deliberate, not decorative. A symbol she hadn't seen in years but never forgotten. Her fingers stilled for half a second. Then she kept moving. "Internal bleed," she said sharply. "Left side. Get me a fast scan now." The resident hesitated. The escort said no imaging until Emily turned on him, eyes hard. "He's bleeding out. You want permission or you want him alive?" The scan confirmed it. Splenic rupture. Severe. Surgical. When the doctor finally arrived and saw the images, his face went pale. "Prep ore," he said. "Now." Outside, the men in dark jackets made calls. Voices rose, then fell. Someone argued. Someone lost. In the operating room, Emily worked with a precision that bordered on reverence. Every movement was efficient. Every command clipped and clear. The surgeon noticed even through his focus. "You've done this before," he said under his breath. Emily didn't answer. The surgery lasted 2 hours. The patient flatlined once. Came back. Barely. When it was over, Emily stepped back, her gloves streaked red, her heart steady despite the adrenaline still burning through her veins. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt watched. In the hallway, one of the men intercepted her. Older, grey at the temples. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "You crossed a line tonight," he said quietly. Emily met his gaze. "I saved his life." "That wasn't your decision to make." She wiped her hands slowly. "It always is." He studied her, searching for something, fear maybe. Compliance. He found neither. "You didn't see anything," he said. Emily tilted her head. "I saw a man who needed help." His jaw tightened. "You accessed his chart." "I documented care," she replied. "That's my job." The man leaned in. "This patient doesn't exist. His injuries don't exist. And if you're smart, you'll forget you ever treated him." Emily smiled faintly. It was not a comforting smile. "I don't forget patients," she said. That night after her shift, Emily didn't go home. She sat in her car with the engine off, the hospital lights reflecting off the windshield. She replayed the tattoo in her mind. The pattern. The placement. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. She pulled out her phone and scrolled past dozens of contacts she hadn't used in years. Numbers she'd promised herself she would never call again, not because she couldn't, but because calling them meant crossing back into a world she had left behind on purpose. She stopped on one. No name, just a symbol. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed a message. "Patient alive. Asset compromised. Location verified. No explanation. None needed." The reply came 3 minutes later. "Understood. Do not engage further." Emily shut off her phone. At the hospital, the pressure began almost immediately. Her access to certain systems was quietly restricted. A supervisor reminded her of scope. A memo appeared in her inbox about professional boundaries. The men in dark jackets stopped showing up, but their presence lingered like a bruise you could feel even after the color faded. And then the patient disappeared. "Transferred," they said. "No destination listed." Emily asked questions. Too many. When she pulled the chart again, half the data was gone. Redacted. Sanitized. But not all of it. She had made copies, not digital. Handwritten notes recorded the old way. Dates, times, observations, details no algorithm could erase. At home, she locked them in a small metal box she kept beneath her bed. The same box she'd used years ago to store things that couldn't be replaced. Emily told herself she was being careful. She told herself she was done. But every night she saw the patient's face, heard the words, "You didn't see anything." And every time her answer was the same. "I saw enough." The email from HR came 2 days later. Mandatory meeting. No explanation. Emily read it once, then deleted it. She already knew how this would end. Still, as she walked back into the hospital for what would become her final shift, she had no idea just how many people had underestimated what she'd set in motion, or how close the truth was to breaking through the silence. The warnings began quietly. That was how institutions liked to do it. No confrontation, no accusations sharp enough to invite resistance. Just a gentle tightening of space, like walls inching closer without anyone admitting they were moving. Emily noticed it during her next shift. Her login took longer than usual. The medication dispensing system rejected her fingerprint once before finally accepting it. When she asked IT about the delay, the technician avoided her eyes and muttered something about routine updates. Routine updates didn't usually lock you out of half your permissions. She said nothing. In trauma 2, a junior nurse approached her hesitantly. "Hey Emily, They moved you off nights starting next week. Emily looked up from her chart. Since when effective? Immediately, the nurse said. They said it was to reduce stress. Emily almost smiled. Nights were where she had the most control. Fewer administrators, fewer eyes. Moving her to day shifts wasn't about stress. It was about exposure. Thanks for letting me know, Emily said, her voice neutral. As the hours passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. A supply request she'd put in days ago was suddenly denied. A trauma resident she'd mentored avoided her entirely. When a patient coded in Bay 4, the attending physician didn't call for her despite protocol that said he should. Emily stepped in anyway. The room was chaos. The patient, a teenager car accident, was crashing fast. Emily moved with the same calm authority she always had, calling out compressions, medications, timing. No one questioned her then. They never did when lives were on the line. The patient stabilized. Afterward, the attending pulled her aside. His face was flushed, not with adrenaline but discomfort. I didn't ask for your help, he said. Emily met his gaze evenly. You didn't have to. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You're putting people in a difficult position. So is ignoring a dying kid, she replied. He walked away without another word. At the nurse's station, Emily charted meticulously. Every intervention, every delay, every deviation from protocol. She had learned long ago that memory was fragile, but paper endured. A shadow fell across her screen. Mark Reynolds. Emily, he said too pleasantly. A word. She followed him into his office, noting the way conversations behind her died as the door closed. Reynolds gestured for her to sit. She didn't. This isn't disciplinary, he began. I want to be very clear about that. Emily waited. We've received some concerns, he continued, about your conduct, your judgment. My judgment saved 3 patients this week, Emily said calmly. Reynolds sighed as if she were missing the point. You have a tendency to operate independently, to question decisions that are beyond your purview. Emily folded her arms. You mean when I question orders that endanger patients? His smile tightened. This hospital operates on trust, chain of command, and accountability, Emily added. Reynolds leaned back. You're not in the military anymore, Emily. The words landed heavier than he intended. For the first time, she felt it, the subtle shift. The recognition that this wasn't just about a patient or a chart. They knew. Not everything, but enough. Is that what this is about? She asked quietly. My past, Reynolds didn't answer directly. You've built a good reputation here. We don't want that compromised. Emily tilted her head, then stopped trying to compromise it. The meeting ended without resolution. That was the point. That night, as she left the hospital, she noticed a black sedan idling across the street. Tinted windows. Engine running. It pulled away the moment she looked at it. She didn't chase it. At home, Emily unlocked the metal box beneath her bed and spread its contents across the floor. Notes, times, diagrams she'd sketched from memory, the symbol from the tattoo drawn carefully, accurately. She added one more page. Hospital admin interference, patient disappearance, escalating pressure. She stared at the words longer than necessary. Then she closed the box and slid it back into place. The next morning, her phone rang before sunrise. Unknown number, she answered. You need to stop, the voice said. Different from before. Colder. Less respectful. Emily sat up in bed. I'm not doing anything. That's the problem, the voice replied. You did enough. She recognized the tone now, not authority, but fear masked as control. Is he alive? Emily asked. Silence. You said not to engage further. The voice finally said. That means you too. Emily's grip tightened on the phone. People don't disappear in hospitals by accident. You're walking a line you don't understand. I understand it perfectly, she said. I just don't like where it leads. The call ended. At work, HR emailed again. Mandatory meeting, this time legal included. Emily didn't bother deleting it. The day of the meeting, she wore plain scrubs. No jewelry, no watch. She had learned long ago how to strip yourself of anything that could be used against you. The conference room felt smaller than before. Reynolds was there. Legal. A representative from compliance. No union rep, no advocate. They spoke in careful language. Risk, liability, pattern of behavior. Emily listened. When they finished, she stood. "You're firing me," she said. Reynolds hesitated. "We're terminating your employment effective immediately, for doing my job, for refusing to stay in your lane." Emily nodded once. "You should check your mirrors," she said quietly. Reynolds frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you missed something," she replied. She left without raising her voice. That was her last clock out. But as she walked through the staff exit, the sense of being watched returned stronger now. Not just from across the street. From above. From somewhere far beyond the hospital's reach. She stepped into the night unaware that decisions made in silence were already racing toward her, fast, deliberate, and impossible to stop. The meeting ended at 7:18 p.m. Emily Carter noticed the time because she always did. Not out of sentimentality but habit. One of those reflexes burned into her from years when minutes had meant lives, when clocks were enemies. You negotiated with not decorations on a wall. She signed the termination form without argument. The pen was cheap, the ink uneven. Her name looked smaller than usual on the page, as if it already belonged to someone else. Mark Reynolds cleared his throat. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings." Emily looked up. "That won't be necessary." "It's procedure," Legal said quickly. Emily met the woman's eyes. "So is dignity." A beat passed. Reynolds waved a hand. "Fine. 10 minutes." Emily stood, adjusted the strap of her canvas bag on her shoulder, and walked out of the room. No one followed. They never did when someone accepted the verdict quietly. Noise was what worried administrators. Silence was manageable. As she moved down the hallway, familiar sounds brushed past her. The squeak of carts, the hum of vents, a distant overhead page. A nurse she'd trained years ago glanced up, recognition flashing across her face, then looked away. Emily didn't blame her. At her locker, she worked efficiently. The photo taped inside her father in uniform went into the bag. The extra pens, the folded list of emergency numbers she'd memorized anyway. She left the hospital-issued jacket behind. It had never fit right. She checked the time again. 7:24 p.m. As she shut the locker, footsteps echoed behind her. Dr. Alan Whitmore stopped a few feet away, hands shoved into his coat pockets. "I heard," he said. Emily nodded. "Then you know why." He hesitated. "You made it impossible for them." "I made it impossible to ignore," she replied. He looked tired, older than he had a month ago. "They're scared." "Good," Emily said softly. Whitmore exhaled. "If you'd just waited, he would have died," Emily cut in. "Or disappeared." Whitmore's jaw tightened. He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told her she'd been right. "I'm sorry," he said finally. Emily gave him a small, tired smile. "Be sorry for the next patient." She walked away before he could say anything else. Outside, the evening had settled into that uneasy calm between shift changes. The sky was bruised purple, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Emily crossed the lot, her footsteps unhurried. She felt it then. The pressure. Not fear, anticipation. Her phone vibrated as she reached her car. No caller ID. She didn't answer. Instead, she unlocked the door and sat inside, resting her forehead briefly against the steering wheel. For a moment, just one, she allowed herself to feel the weight of it all. The loss, the exhaustion, the anger she'd kept tightly leashed for weeks. Then she straightened. The phone vibrated again. She answered. "Yes, you shouldn't be there," the voice said. Same as before, the one that knew her cadence. They accelerated. "So did you," Emily replied. A pause. "You were terminated." "I know. You're exposed." Emily glanced up at the hospital roof at the blinking lights of the helipad. "I was always exposed." The voice sighed. "We're inbound." That got her attention. "How long?" 8 minutes. Emily closed her eyes. "That's fast. We didn't want to be late." She ended the call and started the car. As she drove toward the exit, she noticed movement near the emergency entrance. Security was more alert now. Radios crackled. Something had shifted in the building, an undercurrent of unease that even those without training could feel. Emily stopped short of the exit. She could leave. She should leave. Instead, she turned the wheel and parked again, this time closer to the entrance. She cut the engine and stepped out into the open. Wind picked up suddenly, tugging at her scrubs. Inside the hospital, Mark Reynolds was in his office when his assistant knocked hard. "Sir," she said, breathless. "FAA just called. We've got unauthorized aircraft approaching our airspace." Reynolds frowned. "Medical transport. They didn't say." He stood, irritation flaring. "Then who cleared them?" "No one." Before he could respond, the lights flickered. Outside, the first helicopter crested the building, low and aggressive. Rotor wash slammed into the helipad, scattering loose equipment and sending debris skittering across the concrete. The noise was deafening, an overwhelming physical force that rattled windows and shook the ground. People screamed. Phones came out. Security froze. A second helicopter followed, then a third, their silhouettes stark against the darkening sky. Emily stood her ground in the parking lot, hair whipping across her face, bag secured at her side. She didn't shield her eyes. She didn't step back. She simply waited. Inside, Reynolds stared through the glass as men in tactical gear fast-roped onto the roof with terrifying efficiency. This wasn't a medevac. This was a deployment. "What the hell is happening?" he whispered. The answer came moments later when the stairwell doors burst open and a team moved through the hospital with controlled urgency. No shouting, no chaos, just momentum. A security guard stammered, "Sir, they say they have federal authority." Reynolds' mouth went dry. "Authority for what?" The team leader didn't answer him. He scanned the room once, then spoke into his comm. "She's still on site." He turned toward the entrance. Outside, Emily watched the doors swing open. Boots hit the ground in unison. The team leader spotted her instantly. He stopped, raised a hand, and the others halted behind him. For a split second, the world went silent beneath the roar of the rotors. Then he straightened and gave a crisp, unmistakable salute. "Ma'am," he said clearly. Every eye in the hospital turned toward Emily Carter. The salute fractured the night. For a heartbeat, no one moved, not the security guards frozen near the entrance, not the nurses watching from behind glass, not Mark Reynolds, standing pale and rigid just inside the doors. Even the rotors seemed to fade into the background, their thunder reduced to a distant pressure in the chest. Emily Carter didn't return the salute. She didn't need to. She met the team leader's eyes and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. "At ease," she said calmly. The words weren't loud. They didn't have to be. They carried weight earned, not borrowed. The team leader dropped his hand and turned to his unit. "Proceed." They moved with purpose, splitting cleanly into pairs. One headed for administration, another for records. A third secured the stairwells leading to the helipad and lower levels. There was no aggression in their motion, no unnecessary display, just certainty. Inside, the hospital panic tried to find a foothold and failed. "Who authorized this?" Reynolds demanded, finding his voice at last. He stepped forward, straightening his jacket, like posture might restore control. "You can't just, this is a civilian medical facility." The team leader stopped 3 feet from him. "Sir, please remain where you are. I'm the hospital director." "I know." "Then you know you're out of line." The team leader's gaze flicked past Reynolds to Emily, still standing outside, framed by the open doors and the wash of light from the roof. He spoke into his mic without breaking eye contact, confirming primary present. A voice crackled back, calm and unmistakable. "Confirmed. She has command." Reynolds' breath caught. Emily stepped inside. The hospital smelled the same as it always had, disinfectant, coffee, recycled air. But the way people looked at her had changed. Heads bowed slightly without anyone meaning to. Conversations stopped. A nurse near the wall clutched her clipboard as if it were suddenly inadequate armor. Emily walked past Reynolds without acknowledging him and stopped near the nurse's station. "Lock down trauma, too," she said evenly. "And bring me the archived charts from 3 weeks ago. All versions." A compliance officer sputtered. "You don't have." The team leader cut in voice flat. "She does." Hands moved. Keycards beeped. Systems opened. Reynolds stared at Emily's back. "You lied to us," he said hoarsely. Emily turned, finally facing him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was tired. "I never lied," she said. "You just never asked the right questions." She gestured toward the hall. "Bring him in." 2 operators emerged, escorting a man Reynolds had hoped never to see again, the older escort with grey at his temples. His jacket was gone now, replaced by restraints. The sharpness in his eyes had dulled, replaced by something close to calculation's final stage, acceptance. "Director Reynolds," the man said quietly. "It appears the situation has evolved." Reynolds' voice cracked. "Who are you?" The man glanced at Emily, then back at Reynolds. "Someone you should have listened to when you had the chance." Emily crossed her arms. "Status," the team leader responded. "Assets secured. Records retrieved. We've got corroboration from 2 external nodes." Emily nodded. "Bring the files." A tablet was placed in her hands. She scrolled with practiced speed. Dates, redactions, transfers that led nowhere. Payments disguised as consulting fees. A pattern emerged, clean, deliberate. She stopped at a line item and looked up. "You delayed surgical authorization by 12 minutes, she said to Reynolds. "Do you know what 12 minutes means when a spleen ruptures?" Reynolds swallowed. "We were instructed to wait." "By him?" Emily asked, flicking her gaze toward the restrained man. The man didn't deny it. Orders came from above. Emily leaned in just enough to be heard. "Above you isn't above the law." She straightened. "Read the room, Mark. This ends now." The restrained man was led away. A murmur rippled through the staff as the implications sank in. People remembered emails, meetings, quiet warnings that suddenly felt loud in retrospect. Dr. Whitmore stepped forward, eyes fixed on the floor. "Emily, I didn't know the extent." Emily met his gaze. "You knew enough." He nodded once, shame evident. "I should have said something." "Yes," she agreed. "You should have." She turned back to the team leader. "What's the window?" 10 minutes. "Until extraction," he replied. "We'll take custody and move the patient." Emily hesitated. Not because she doubted the plan, but because of what came after. Reynolds found his voice again brittle and desperate. "You can't just take over a hospital. There are procedures." Emily looked at him. "There are consequences." She handed the tablet back. "Notify the board. Notify federal oversight. And notify every family who trusted this place that the truth is coming." A compliance officer whispered, "This will destroy us." Emily shook her head. "No. What you did is what destroys institutions. Accountability is how they survive." The rotors above shifted pitch a signal. Time was compressing. As the team prepared to move, a nurse stepped forward hesitantly. Young, new, the kind who still believed doing the right thing would be rewarded. "Ma'am," she said, voice trembling. Are you leaving?" Emily considered her. The fear, the hope, the question beneath the question. "I'm stepping out of the way," Emily said gently, "so you can do your job without being told to look away." The nurse nodded, swallowing hard. In trauma 2, the patient lay stabilized machines, whispering life into the quiet. As the team transferred him with reverence, Emily placed a hand briefly on the bedrail. "You're safe now," she said. Outside, the night waited. The extraction moved like clockwork. Doors opened. Wind surged. Lights strobed red and white across the pavement. The helicopters lifted one by one, carrying truth back into the open air. When the noise finally faded, the hospital was left with an unfamiliar sound. Silence. Emily stood near the entrance as staff drifted back to their posts, unsure how to resume normalcy when normal had just been exposed as a lie. The team leader approached her. "Ma'am, Command wants to speak with you." Emily nodded. "Tell them I'm listening." He lowered his voice. "They'll ask you to come back." She smiled faintly. "I know." And Emily looked through the glass at the ER she'd given years of her life to. The place where people came broken and left, sometimes healed, sometimes not, but always needing someone to stand between them and indifference. "I'll decide," she said. After what?" "After the dust settles," Emily replied. "And the right people are still standing." She shouldered her bag and walked back into the hospital, not as an employee, not as a commander, but as someone who had finished one duty and was choosing the next. Behind her, the doors closed softly. Ahead, the reckoning had only just begun. By the time the last helicopter vanished into the clouds, the hospital no longer belonged to itself. It belonged to the aftermath. Administrators clustered in corners, whispering into phones that no one on the other end was eager to answer. Security stood uncertain, radios crackling with instructions that contradicted one another. Nurses drifted back to stations with the careful movements of people afraid to disturb a crime scene that hadn't been taped off yet. Emily Carter felt it all, the shift in gravity, the way power redistributed when exposed to air. She stood near the nurses' station hands, resting lightly on the counter, listening, not to words but to rhythm. Fear had a cadence. So did guilt. So did relief. Dr. Whitmore approached again, slower this time, as if unsure of his right to occupy the same space. "They're asking questions upstairs," he said quietly. "About records, about delays." Emily nodded. "They should. They want statements." Emily met his eyes. "Tell the truth." Whitmore swallowed. "That won't protect everyone." "No," she agreed. "It won't." Down the hall, Mark Reynolds sat in a chair he had never occupied before, plastic bolted to the floor, positioned beneath a flickering light. A federal agent spoke to him in calm, measured tones. Reynolds' responses were clipped, defensive. Each answer seemed to shrink him further. For years he had been the tallest presence in the room. Now he was learning what it felt like to be small. A compliance officer approached Emily with tentative steps. "Miss Carter, Emily, there's talk of a full federal audit." Emily didn't look surprised. "There should be. This could shut us down." "Then you'll reopen, honest," she replied. The woman hesitated. "You could help us. You have influence now." Emily's gaze hardened slightly. "I don't trade truth for comfort." The officer nodded, chastened, and moved away. A young resident lingered nearby, watching Emily with open awe. "They really called you ma'am," he said half to himself. Emily offered a faint smile. "Titles don't matter. Actions do. But you were just a nurse." Emily turned to face him fully. "I was never just anything." Word spread quickly. Hospitals thrived on rumor, and tonight's events fed them greedily. Phones buzzed with texts from other facilities. News vans idled beyond the perimeter cameras trained on the building, as if waiting for it to confess. Inside, a line of patients formed at the admissions desk, ordinary people with ordinary emergencies, unaware that the institution treating them had just been peeled open. Emily watched a mother clutch her son's hand, fear etched deep. She stepped forward without thinking. "I've got him," she said, gently guiding the boy toward triage. Her voice steadied the room the way it always had. For a moment it felt almost normal. Then her phone vibrated. This time the number was visible. She stepped aside to answer. Yes, the voice on the other end was older, gravel-edged, accustomed to being obeyed. "They're going to ask you to testify," it said. "I know. They'll want you back. Uniform, rank, full authority." Emily glanced around the ER at the patients, the nurses, the fractures no report could capture. "And if I say no," a pause, "then you walk away clean." Emily exhaled slowly. "There's no such thing as clean." Silence acknowledged that truth. "We'll support whatever you decide," the voice said at last. "But understand this, if you stay, they'll make you a symbol." Emily's lips curved, not in amusement but recognition. "I've been a symbol before. And symbols get used," she replied. "People forget the human underneath." The call ended. Moments later, a federal agent approached her. Professional, respectful, clipboard in hand. "Miss Carter, we'll need your statement. Tonight, if possible." Emily nodded. "I'll give it." And after, Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. Time had resumed its quiet tyranny. After she said, "I go back to work," the agent blinked. "You're not employed here." Emily smiled. "I didn't say I was clocking in." She spent the next hour answering questions with precision. No embellishment, no restraint. Facts ordered and relentless. She named delays. She named meetings. She named the moment she realized the patient was being erased. The agent's pen moved faster as she spoke. When it was over, he closed the file carefully. "You understand what this means? Yes, you'll be subpoenaed. Yes, you'll make enemies." Emily met his gaze. Already did. As dawn crept toward the horizon, exhaustion finally brushed her shoulders. The adrenaline thinned. The weight settled. She stepped outside for air. The parking lot was quiet now, debris cleared, lights steady. The space where the helicopters had landed looked ordinary again, too ordinary given what had passed through it. Dr. Whitmore joined her hands shoved into his pockets against the chill. "They'll remove Reynolds," he said. The board won't survive this intact. Emily nodded. That's how change starts. He hesitated. They're talking about offering you your position back, with protections. Emily studied the sky, pale with approaching morning. Protections don't fix character. Whitmore sighed. You could rebuild this place. She looked at him. So could you. He held her gaze, understanding, settling in slowly. You're not staying. I am, Emily said quietly. Just not how you think. A nurse burst through the doors, breathless. Emily, sorry, miss. Carter. The patient. He's asking for you. Emily didn't hesitate. In trauma 2, the man lay awake now, eyes clearer than they'd been weeks ago. He turned his head when she entered. You stayed, he rasped. I did, Emily replied, taking his hand briefly. So did you. He swallowed. They told me you paid a price. Emily shook her head. I paid a cost. There's a difference. He closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. Outside the room, the hospital hummed with an unfamiliar energy. Fear, yes, but also possibility. The kind that came when lies were dragged into the light, and people had to decide who they would be next. Emily stepped back into the hallway. The reckoning was no longer approaching. It had arrived, and it wasn't finished yet. Morning didn't soften the hospital. If anything, daylight made the damage clearer. Sunlight poured through the glass atrium, illuminating faces that hadn't slept, eyes ringed with shock and something closer to fear. News vans lined the street now, their antennas angled toward the building like questions waiting to be answered. Security tried and failed to keep reporters at a distance. Emily Carter moved through it all unseen, not invisible, unclaimed. She had changed out of her scrubs and into plain clothes she kept in her bag for emergencies. Dark jeans, a grey sweater, shoes built for standing, not running. The lack of uniform felt strange, lighter, heavier. Inside a temporary command room, federal agents reviewed footage and logs on large monitors. Conversations overlapped in low, urgent tones. Names were spoken carefully, as if saying them too loudly might make them vanish. Emily stood at the edge of the room listening. This wasn't a one-off, one agent said. This hospital was used as a choke point. Financial pressure, another added. Threats disguised as incentives. They were told to wait, delay care, create plausible deniability. Emily stepped forward, and they complied. All eyes turned to her. The first agent nodded. Most of them. Emily crossed her arms. Most isn't all. No, he agreed. But it's enough. She studied the screen showing a freeze frame of the ER 3 weeks ago, the moment when the patient's gurney crossed the threshold, men in dark jackets flanking him. She remembered that instant clearly. The way the room had gone quiet. The way instinct had risen before thought. People like to believe they'd do the right thing, she said, until doing the right thing costs them. The agent looked at her differently now, not as a witness, as a variable. A knock interrupted them. A woman in a tailored suit entered, flanked by 2 aides. Her badge read Federal Oversight Liaison. Her eyes went straight to Emily. Miss Carter, she said, I've been looking for you. Emily nodded. You found me. The woman gestured toward a quieter corner. We need to talk. They stepped aside. You've already given your statement, the liaison began, but there's more we need. Emily waited. We're forming a joint review board, the woman continued. Medical ethics, federal compliance, special operations oversight. This case crosses lines that don't usually intersect. And you want me to sit on it, Emily said. The liaison didn't deny it. Your perspective is unique. Emily almost smiled. That's one word for it. This isn't about power, the woman added quickly. It's about preventing this from happening again. Emily's gaze flicked toward the ER doors where a nurse argued quietly with a distraught family member. Prevention starts on the floor, she said. Not in conference rooms. The liaison hesitated. You could do both. Emily met her eyes. And who watches the patients while we debate language? Silence stretched between them. Finally, the liaison sighed. You're difficult. Emily shrugged. I've been called worse. The woman softened slightly. You could have stayed quiet, protected yourself. Emily's voice lowered. I didn't join a profession that asks me to look away. The liaison nodded once. Think about it, she said, and walked away. Hours passed in fragments. Interviews, calls, paperwork that felt endless. Emily answered when needed, stepped back when not. She noticed the way staff watched her now, not with awe but with recalibration. They were rewriting her in their minds. Near noon, Dr. Whitmore approached again, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one. Peace offering, he said. Emily took it. Careful. People will talk. They already are, he replied. They stood near a window overlooking the street, the city moving on below them, indifferent. They're dismantling everything, Whitmore said quietly. Committees, contracts, relationships we didn't even know existed. Emily nodded. Good. He hesitated. You could have burned this place down. I didn't come to burn anything, she replied. I came to stop a fire. Whitmore studied her. You're not staying on the board. No. You're not taking a federal role. No. You're not going back to the military. Emily took a sip of coffee. No. So what are you doing? Emily watched an ambulance pull in, lights flashing. A familiar urgency rose in her chest. I'm doing what I always did, she said. I'm showing up where I'm needed. Whitmore frowned. You can't just walk back in here. She met his gaze. Watch me. As if on cue, a code was called overhead. Emily moved without thinking. In Bay 3, a middle-aged man was crashing hard, chest pain spiraling into arrhythmia. The room filled fast. A nurse froze, hands shaking. Emily stepped in, voice steady. Clear. Start compressions. The team responded instinctively. They always had. No one asked if she was authorized. No one questioned her presence. They stabilized the patient in 7 minutes. When it was over, the room exhaled as one. The nurse looked at Emily, eyes wide. Thank you. Emily nodded. You did fine. Word spread. By afternoon, it was impossible to pretend she wasn't part of the hospital's pulse. Administrators noticed. Agents noticed. So did the board. Emily was called into another room, smaller this time. 3 board members sat waiting, expressions strained. We owe you an apology, one began. Emily didn't sit. Apologies don't change outcomes. We failed, another said. We're prepared to offer you a role, one with autonomy. Emily tilted her head. And when autonomy becomes inconvenient, the man hesitated. That's what I thought, she said. She turned to leave. Emily, the first board member, called. What do you want? She stopped. I want a hospital that treats patients like people, she said, and staff like they matter. I want decisions made in daylight, and when pressure comes, because it always does, I want people brave enough to say no. The room was silent. That's not a position, someone said. Emily looked back at them. It's a standard. She walked out. As evening approached, the hospital settled into a new rhythm, unsteady, uncertain but honest. The lies had been pulled out by the roots. What remained would have to grow again, slower this time. Emily stepped outside as the sun dipped low. Her phone buzzed. A message. No number. Command acknowledges your choice. Emily typed a reply. So do I. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and headed toward the ER entrance. Not as a symbol, not as a secret, just as someone who refused to let silence become an excuse. The subpoenas began arriving before the sun set. They came by courier, by encrypted email, by calls routed through offices that usually didn't speak to hospitals unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Names that had once carried weight now appeared in subject lines, followed by the same quiet word required. Emily Carter watched the ripple effect from the nurses' station. Phones rang and weren't answered. Doors closed and stayed that way. A senior administrator resigned before dinner, citing health reasons that fooled no one. Another was escorted out by 2 agents who spoke politely and waited patiently while she gathered her purse with shaking hands. Accountability, Emily thought, was rarely dramatic. It was methodical. In a glass-walled conference room, Mark Reynolds sat with his attorney, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up like a man who believed effort could substitute for truth. His voice rose and fell, pleading one moment, indignant the next. They don't understand healthcare, he said. They don't understand pressure. The attorney nodded absently. They understand records. Reynolds glanced through the glass and saw Emily standing down the hall, speaking quietly to a nurse. His jaw tightened. Her, he said. She did this. The attorney followed his gaze. She testified. She orchestrated it. The attorney finally looked at him. You orchestrated it. She documented it. Reynolds fell silent. In the ER, Emily finished helping a resident suture a laceration. She washed her hands, slowly grounding herself in the familiar ritual. Water, soap, 30 seconds. The resident cleared his throat. I didn't know, he said. Emily met his eyes in the mirror. You suspected? That's not the same. No, she agreed. But it's close. He swallowed. What would you have done? Emily turned off the faucet. You don't get to ask that after the fact. Word reached the department that federal investigators wanted to walk through the timeline minute by minute of the night the patient had arrived. Emily was asked to lead it. She didn't hesitate. They stood in trauma too as she spoke, the room stripped of noise and urgency, now its equipment humming patiently. 0207, Emily said. Arrival. No sirens. Escorts present. An agent jotted notes. Why does that matter? Because emergencies announce themselves, Emily replied. This one was trying not to. She pointed to the spot where the gurney had stopped. Here, the first hesitation. They expected compliance. She moved a few steps. Here's where I saw the tattoo. Another agent looked up. You recognized it? Yes. From where Emily's expression didn't change. From a life I no longer live, they continued. At the nurse's station, she described the delay in authorization. In the hallway, the conversation with the escort. In the OR, the fight for minutes that no one wanted to own. The agents listened, faces tightening as the picture formed. This wasn't negligence, one said quietly. This was intent. Emily nodded. That's why it mattered. By evening, the hospital felt like a different place, not safer yet, but honest in its unease. Staff spoke in low voices, choosing words carefully. The old confidence had been replaced by something fragile but real. Dr. Whitmore found Emily near the supply room. They're charging Reynolds, he said. Obstruction. Conspiracy. Emily exhaled slowly. Good. And the escort. Already in custody. Whitmore studied her. You look tired. I am. He hesitated. You don't have to stay. Emily glanced down the hall where a nurse was teaching a new hire how to calibrate to monitor her hands steady despite the chaos around them. I do, she said. For now. Later, Emily was called to speak with the patient, now strong enough to sit upright, color returning to his face. He looked older than she'd first thought, worn by years of carrying things that couldn't be set down. They're going to move me, he said quietly. Yes, Emily replied. Somewhere safer. He nodded. They told me what you did. Emily pulled a chair closer. I did my job. You risked everything. Emily met his gaze. I measured the risk. He swallowed. They said you used to. She held up a hand gently. That part doesn't matter. He nodded, respecting the boundary. What matters is this, he said, lowering his voice. People will try to thank you, to put you on a pedestal. Emily smiled faintly. Pedestals make it hard to reach people. He smiled back, relieved. Then, thank you for staying human. As night returned, the building exhaled. The news vans thinned. Agents packed up files. Staff took turns stepping outside to breathe. Emily stood near the entrance when a woman approached, middle-aged, anxious, clutching a folded paper. Are you Emily Carter? She asked. Emily nodded. I'm the mother of the boy you helped yesterday, the woman said, voice trembling. They said you, Emily, shook her head. He did the hard part. The woman pressed the paper into Emily's hand. A note, 2 words written carefully. Thank you. Emily folded it and slipped it into her pocket. Inside the administrative wing, a board member resigned on a recorded call, voice breaking as he admitted he'd known something was wrong and chosen silence anyway. The recording ended. A decision had been made. Consequences, Emily thought, were rarely sudden. They accumulated. Near midnight, an agent approached her again. Miss Carter, we'll need you in court. Emily nodded. I'll be there. There will be pushback, he warned. People will question your credibility. Emily met his gaze calmly. They can try. He hesitated. They'll ask why you didn't go higher sooner. Emily's voice was steady. I did. Higher than they expected. The agent allowed himself a small smile. Fair. As she prepared to leave for the night, really leave this time, Emily walked the length of the ER one last time. She stopped at each bay, checked each monitor, exchanged nods with staff who met her eyes without fear now. At the doors she paused. Dr. Whitmore stood behind her. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked. Emily looked back at the department. "Tomorrow you do the work. You speak up. You protect your patients. And you," Emily shouldered her bag, "I'll show up when it matters." Outside, the air was cool and clean. The parking lot lights cast long shadows. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt something loosen in her chest. The truth was out. Now it would have to stand. The courtroom smelled nothing like a hospital. No antiseptic, no warm plastic. Just old wood recycled air and the quiet hum of expectation. Emily Carter sat in the second row, hands folded in her lap posture, straight without trying. She wore a navy blazer she hadn't touched in years, the kind that blended in neither defiant nor deferential. Across the aisle, Mark Reynolds avoided looking at her. He'd aged in weeks what years hadn't managed. The confidence that once carried him through donor dinners and board meetings had collapsed inward, leaving something brittle behind. His attorney whispered to him, tapping a yellow legal pad. Reynolds nodded too quickly. When Emily's name was called, the room shifted. Not loudly, not obviously, but the air leaned forward. She stood and walked to the witness stand, steps measured. Cameras were barred, but reporters filled the back rows, pens poised. The judge watched her with the practiced neutrality of someone who had seen many versions of truth try to pass for the same thing. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" the clerk asked. "I do," Emily replied. The prosecution began simply. Timeline, credentials, role. "Miss Carter," the prosecutor said, "how long had you worked at the hospital?" 17 years. "And your position, ER charge nurse. Were you trained to make life and death decisions under pressure?" Emily paused. "Yes." "By whom?" "By experience," she said evenly, "and by prior service." A murmur moved through the room. The defense objected. "Relevance." The judge considered, then nodded. "Proceed." The questions sharpened. "On the night in question, did you follow hospital protocol?" Emily answered without hesitation. "I followed medical protocol, and when those conflicted, I followed the one that keeps patients alive." The defense rose for cross-examination, eyes bright with intent. "Miss Carter," he began, voice smooth, "you accessed restricted files." "Correct." "Yes." "You defied direct instructions from hospital leadership." "Yes." "You contacted external parties without authorization." Emily met his gaze. "I contacted people whose job is to stop patients from being erased." A ripple ran through the courtroom. The attorney leaned in. "You're suggesting a conspiracy." "I'm describing one." He smiled thinly. "Isn't it true you have a history of operating outside civilian oversight?" Emily's eyes didn't flicker. "Isn't it true," she replied calmly, "that oversight failed here?" The judge raised a hand. "Answer the question." Emily nodded. "I have a history of accountability," the attorney pressed. "You want this court to believe you acted alone, that you, a nurse, uncovered what administrators and federal liaisons missed." "I didn't act alone," Emily said. "I acted first." Silence. Then the prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, permission to enter exhibits." Screens lit up. Emails. Redacted charts. Time-stamps aligning too neatly to be coincidence. A payment ledger surfaced, consulting fees routed through shell entities that didn't survive 5 minutes of scrutiny. The defense faltered. Reynolds' shoulders sagged. When Emily stepped down from the stand, the judge called a recess. People surged to their feet, conversations breaking out in low, urgent tones. Reporters rushed for the exits, phones already buzzing. In the hallway, Dr. Whitmore found her. "They're folding," he said quietly. "Reynolds' attorney is negotiating." Emily nodded. "Good. They're asking for leniency." Emily's mouth tightened. "They asked for silence before." A federal agent approached, offering a bottle of water. "You did well." Emily accepted it. "I told the truth. That's rarer than you'd think." As they spoke, a woman stepped out of a side room, gray hair pulled, tight posture, rigid with authority. She wore a pin that marked her as someone used to rooms like this bending toward her. "Miss Carter," she said. A word. They moved aside. "You've made your point," the woman said. "Publicly. Thoroughly." Emily waited. "There's concern," the woman continued. "About precedent. about encouraging staff to bypass channels. Emily met her eyes. Channels that fail get bypassed. The woman's jaw tightened. This could destabilize institutions. Institutions that require silence to function deserve to be destabilized. A beat. You're difficult, the woman said. Emily's expression softened just enough to be human. People said that about seatbelts once. The woman almost smiled. Almost. The recess ended. Back in the courtroom, the judge reconvened. The defense announced a plea. Charges would proceed. Names would be named. Oversight expanded. When the gavel struck, it sounded final. Outside, the sky had darkened. Flashing lights bounced off stone as reporters called out questions. Emily kept walking head down until the noise fell behind her. At the hospital, the night shift had taken over. Familiar faces nodded as she passed through the doors. No fanfare, no whispers, just work. A code blue rang out overhead. Emily moved without thinking. In Bay 5, an elderly woman clutched at the air panic, overtaking breath. The team stumbled for a moment, new hands, tired eyes. Emily stepped in, voice steady. Slow down. Listen to her breathing. They did. The patient stabilized. Afterward, the resident exhaled. I don't know what we'd do without you. Emily shook her head. You'd learn. That's the point. Near midnight, her phone buzzed again. A single message. Command requests your presence. Offer stands. Emily typed a reply. Declined. For now. A moment later, another message arrived. Understood. Respectfully. She slipped the phone away. At the nurse's station, a young nurse approached, hesitant. Emily, are you staying? Emily looked around, the beeping monitors, the quiet competence, the fragility of trust being rebuilt inch by inch. I'm here, she said. Tonight. The nurse nodded, relieved. As dawn hinted at the horizon, Emily stepped outside for a breath of cool air. The city was quiet, holding its breath between nights. She thought of the courtroom, the records, the consequences unfolding beyond her control. She also thought of the patients who would arrive in the next hour unaware of any of it. That was where she belonged. Behind her, the doors opened softly. Someone called her name. Emily turned. The person calling her name wasn't a reporter. It was the hospital board chair. Elaine Morris stood just inside the glass doors, posture formal, expression careful. She had the look of someone who had spent the night reading documents that rewrote her understanding of the world she thought she ran. Emily, Elaine said again. We need to talk. Emily checked the clock above the nurse's station. 5:42 a.m. The hour when exhaustion made liars sloppy and truth feel heavier than it already was. I have 10 minutes, Emily replied. Elaine nodded, accepting the boundary. They stepped into a quiet office that had once belonged to a department head who no longer worked there. The nameplate had been removed. The wall behind the desk was bare lighter where framed awards used to hang. Elaine didn't sit, neither did Emily. The board voted an hour ago, Elaine began. Unanimously, Emily waited. We're removing all interim leadership connected to the case. Full cooperation with federal oversight. Independent ethics monitors. Emily nodded once. Good. Elaine inhaled. We're also offering you reinstatement. Emily's gaze didn't change. Full autonomy, Elaine continued quickly. Direct access to compliance. A protected reporting channel that bypasses administration entirely. Your own team if you want it. Emily studied her. And when pressure comes, Elaine didn't dodge it. Then we hold the line. Silence stretched. Not awkward. Measuring. Emily spoke quietly. I was escorted out of this building 3 days ago like a liability. Elaine's jaw tightened. We failed you. You failed patients, Emily corrected. I was just in the way. Elaine nodded, the admission costing her. You're right. Emily turned toward the door. Then fix the system. Don't offer me a badge to stand in front of it. Elaine's voice softened. What if we need you to help rebuild? Emily paused. Rebuilding doesn't start with titles. Elaine hesitated. What does it start with? Emily looked back at her. Listening. When the next nurse says something feels wrong, you don't ask how it affects donors. You ask who it hurts. Elaine absorbed that, eyes downcast. Will you stay? Emily considered the question carefully. I'll work, she said. I won't belong. Elaine nodded slowly. Then we'll make room. As Emily stepped back into the ER, the day shift was arriving, faces tired, eyes curious. News traveled fast in hospitals. So did judgment. She felt it all and let it pass through her. She moved to a bay where a man waited alone, hands clasped too tightly. His chart glowed on the screen. Chest pain, anxiety. Emily pulled a stool close. "Tell me what you're feeling." He hesitated. "Like something bad is coming." Emily nodded. "That happens here." They worked through it together, breath by breath, data replacing fear. The man steadied gratitude, soft and wordless. By mid-morning, federal agents returned for final pickups. Boxes sealed, hard drives catalogued. A sense of inevitability settled in the kind that followed storms when the air turned clean and unforgiving. Dr. Whitmore found Emily near the supply room again. "They're changing protocols," he said. "Immediate imaging authority for charge nurses in trauma. No administrative delays." Emily met his eyes. "Put it in writing." He smiled weakly. "Already done. And training mandatory. Real scenarios. Real consequences." Emily nodded. "Then maybe this sticks." A nurse approached with a question. Then another. Soon Emily was back in the rhythm, guiding, correcting, reminding people to breathe. She didn't take the lead. She didn't step back either. At noon, a federal agent requested a final signature. Emily signed without ceremony. "Thank you," he said, "for not disappearing." Emily looked up. "That's not my style." Her phone buzzed. A new message. "Command requests a decision within 24 hours." Emily typed back. "Not yet." The reply came almost immediately. "Understood." She slipped the phone away and returned to the floor. In Trauma 2, a nurse froze during a procedure, doubt creeping in. Emily leaned close. "You know this," she said quietly. "Trust your hands." The nurse nodded and continued. By late afternoon, the hospital felt different. Not healed, honest. The kind of honest that hurt before it helped. Elaine Morris passed by once, caught Emily's eye and gave a small nod. No speeches, no promises. That was new. As evening approached, Emily stepped outside again. The sky was clear, the air cooler. She leaned against the railing and let herself feel the tiredness fully for the first time. 17 years. Countless nights. One choice that refused to stay quiet. Behind her, footsteps approached. The patient, now dressed steadier, stood a few feet away. He held a folded jacket over his arm. "They're moving me tonight," he said. Emily nodded. "Good. They told me you didn't take the offer." "I didn't," Emily said. He studied her. "Why?" Emily considered. "Because staying has to mean something." He nodded. "You changed things." Emily shook her head. "I interrupted them." "That's enough," he said. They stood in companionable silence. Inside, a code was called and resolved. A child laughed somewhere down the hall. The hospital breathed. Emily checked the time. 6:05, 8 p.m. She walked back inside, not clocking in, not clocking out, just stepping into the work. Behind her, the doors closed gently. Tomorrow would bring decisions, offers, consequences still unfolding. Tonight, there were patients. Night returned without asking permission. The hospital lights dimmed into their after-hours glow, softer but no less vigilant. The day's reckoning settled into paperwork and quiet conversations that would ripple outward for months. For now, the building returned to what it knew best, holding pain, hope, and the fragile space between them. Emily Carter moved through the ER like a familiar current, not directing, not commanding, just present. A trauma alert came in multi-vehicle collision, 3 patients en route. The doors burst open, gurneys rolling, voices overlapping. Emily stepped aside at first, watching the team assemble. New protocols were tested in real time. Authority flowed where it was needed, not where it was comfortable. When a resident hesitated, Emily leaned in. "You're good," she said. "Make the call." He did. It was the smallest victory of the night and the most important. Between cases, she washed her hands and caught her reflection in the stainless steel, tired eyes, steady posture. No badge clipped to her collar. No rank to announce who she was. She'd never needed it. Dr. Whitmore joined her near the sink. "The board finalized the changes," he said quietly. "Public statement goes out at midnight." Emily nodded. "Good. They mentioned you." Emily looked up. How? As a nurse who spoke up. She considered that, then shrugged. That's accurate. Whitmore smiled. They wanted to say more. Then they missed the point, she replied. A nurse approached, holding a chart. Emily, sorry, Miss Carter. Emily raised a hand gently. Emily's fine. The nurse nodded, relief obvious. We've got a patient asking for you. He won't calm down. Emily followed her to Bay 7. The man inside was older hands, shaking oxygen, hissing softly. His eyes darted until they landed on her. You're the one, he said. I'm here, Emily replied, pulling a chair close. Tell me what you're feeling. Like I'm not supposed to be, he said. Like if I say the wrong thing, something bad happens. Emily listened. Not to the words alone, to the cadence, the pauses. Fear layered over long habits of silence. You're safe here, she said. Say it anyway. He did. When it was over, his breathing slowed. The nurse exhaled. Thank you. Emily stood. You did the work. As midnight approached, the building grew quieter. The news vans were gone. The phones rang less. Consequences moved from spectacle to process. Emily stepped outside for air. The parking lot was nearly empty now. The helipad lights glowed softly above Dormant. She remembered the thunder of rotors, the way the ground had shaken the word ma'am cutting through the noise. She hadn't corrected it. She hadn't needed to. Her phone buzzed. A call this time. She answered. You've made your choice, the voice said. Emily leaned against the railing. I have. You're declining the offer. For now. A pause. You could do more with us. Emily looked back through the glass at the ER, at a nurse laughing quietly with a patient, at a resident reviewing scans with care. I'm doing more here. Another pause. Longer. Understood, the voice said. Door remains open. Thank you, Emily replied. She ended the call and slipped the phone away. Inside, the night supervisor approached. Emily, the board chair, asked if you'd like to say a few words to the staff. Emily shook her head. They don't need words. What do they need? Emily smiled faintly. Back up. She returned to the floor. Near 130 A.M., an ambulance arrived without sirens. Emily noticed. She met the gurney at the door, eyes scanning, hands ready. The patient was young, unconscious, bruised. No escorts this time. No shadows trying to blend in. Just a person who needed help. Let's move, Emily said. They did. As the team worked, the hospital felt aligned, imperfect but honest. Decisions made in daylight. Questions asked out loud. Protocols serving people, not the other way around. When the patient stabilized, a nurse leaned close. It feels different tonight, she whispered. Emily nodded. It should. At dawn, the sky lightened again. Another cycle completed. Elaine Morris passed through the ER, quietly, stopping only once to catch Emily's eye. No speeches. Just a nod. Emily returned it. By the time the morning shift arrived, Emily was already tired in a way that felt earned. She finished a final chart, then closed the system. At the staff exit, she paused. The time clock glowed softly on the wall. She didn't touch it. A new nurse stood nearby, hesitating. Do we need to clock you out? Emily smiled. No. She pushed the door open and stepped into the morning. The city woke around her cars, passing a dog barking, someone laughing too loud on a phone. Ordinary sounds grounding and real. Behind her, the hospital continued without her name attached to it. That was the point. As Emily walked to her car, a security guard nodded respectfully. Morning. Morning, she replied. She drove away slowly, the building shrinking in the mirror. Not finished. Just changed. There's a quiet lie many of us grow up believing, that power always announces itself, that authority is loud, visible, and easy to recognize. Real life teaches the opposite. Some of the strongest people in the room are the ones no one bothers to look at twice. They don't wear the biggest titles. They don't raise their voices. They simply refuse to look away when something feels wrong. Courage isn't always dramatic. Most of the time, it's painfully inconvenient. It costs comfort, reputation, and sometimes the very job that puts food on the table. Doing the right thing rarely comes with applause in the moment, but it always leaves a mark on systems, on people, on lives you may never fully see. This story isn't about being special. It's about being responsible, about understanding that silence is a choice and choosing not to hide behind it. You don't need permission to protect someone who can't protect themselves. You don't need rank to tell the truth. And you don't need recognition for your actions to matter. If you've ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken, or spoken up when it would have been easier to stay quiet, this story is for you. I'd love to hear from you. What's a moment in your life when doing the right thing cost you something? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to read it. And if stories about quiet strength, hidden integrity, and justice finding its way resonate with you, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this waiting, and they're worth being told.